Tonight after the ambush, New York City honors 2 fallen police officers. 1 victim's family calls for calm. The NYPD traces the killer's steps to Baltimore. Don Daler reports. Holiday storm watch, rain, wind, and snow impacting travel plans from coast to coast. Eric Fisher has the national forecast. Juliana Goldman on the diplomatic steps the U.S. is taking to further isolate North Korea following the Sony hack attack.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
And 100 years ago today, a bloody World War I battlefield turned into a Christmas celebration and perhaps even a soccer game between enemies. Mark Phillips looks back.
This is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Anne-Marie Green. The New York City Police Department is on high alert tonight, one day after an ambush attack that killed 2 of their officers by a man who came to a city on edge with a mission to kill cops. Before opening fire, police say the suspect told witnesses, "Watch what I'm going to do." He then shot the officers through a car window. The murders took place outside a housing project in Brooklyn. Don Daler is at the scene tonight. Don.
Anne-Marie, the 2 officers were sitting in their parked police cruiser along this street. They were working an overtime shift to protect the people who live in that housing project. A newly released video shot from one of those windows shows what happened shortly after Ismail Brinsley opened fire. Moments after officers Wenjin Liu and Rafael Ramos were shot multiple times, emergency workers desperately tried to save their lives. Liu, a 7-year veteran, had been married only 2 months. Ramos, a father of 2, was a former school safety officer who joined the NYPD 2 years ago. Ramos's family spoke late this afternoon.
I would like to thank all those who have shared their sympathy and support for our beloved family member, Rafael Ramos.
Police say the killer, 28-year-old Ismail Brinsley, acted out of vengeance over recent deaths of black men during encounters with police.
They were quite simply assassinated.
Earlier, Brinsley allegedly shot and wounded his ex-girlfriend in Baltimore. He posted this photo of his bloodied pants. Baltimore police took note of his other Instagram postings, which included, "I'm putting wings on pigs today," with the hashtags RIP Eric Garner, RIP Mike Brown, and Shoot the Police. He also wrote, "This may be my final post." Cell phone tracking showed he traveled by bus to New York City. Baltimore police called the NYPD at 2 p.m. and faxed an alert at 2:45. Too late to warn Ramos and Liu.
Tragically, this was essentially at the same time as our officers were being ambushed and murdered by Brinsley.
Brinsley had a considerable criminal history, with 19 arrests in Georgia and Ohio for robbery, domestic violence, and weapons charges.
Mrs. Gwen Carr.
Condemnation of the murders was immediate, including from members of Eric Garner's family.
We want you to not use Eric Garner's name for violence, because we are not about that.
But even as they mourned the loss of 2 of their own, some members of the NYPD also condemned New York City's mayor, Bill de Blasio, as being anti-cop, because they say he's more sympathetic towards protesters than police. Last night, officers turned their backs on the mayor as he passed by. Today, police said Brinsley's mother told him he tried to commit suicide last year and may have been on medication for an unspecified mental illness. After the shooting, Brinsley ran a few streets over to a subway station where police say he committed suicide. Anne-Marie, the New York Yankees baseball organization has offered to pay for the educations of Officer Ramos's 2 sons.
All right, Don, thank you. Another police officer was killed overnight in Tarpon Springs, Florida. Officer Charles Condek was gunned down while responding to a noise complaint. Police say they arrested the suspect after he tried to get away in a car but crashed it. Condek was a former member of the NYPD. And at least 6 people have been hospitalized after a lightning strike in Tampa. It happened in the parking lot of Raymond James Stadium just after today's game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Green Bay Packers. According to the local fire department, all are in stable condition. Heavy rains and extremely high tides, called king tides, are bringing floods and possibly more mudslides to Northern California. Mark Kelly of our Bay Area affiliate KPIX has the latest.
Big waves in the Pacific Ocean pummel the shore in California today. This week continued one of the wettest Decembers on record. The king tides will likely overwhelm cities like Mill Valley, where forecasters predict the tide will top 7 feet. 3 inches of water has already crept through the local streets. For Ashley Rabinek, the weather here takes some getting used to.
We moved out here a year ago and saw no rain for the first month we lived here, so seeing all this rain for the first time was pretty overwhelming.
A coastal flood advisory will stay in effect here through tomorrow. For CBS News, I'm Mark Kelly in Mill Valley.
It is the first day of winter, and pre-Christmas storms are expected to cause problems for holiday travelers across the country this week. Let us bring in Chief Meteorologist Eric Fisher from our Boston station WBZ. How bad is it going to get, Eric?
Well, Anne-Marie, we've been tracking an atmospheric river of moisture dousing the northwest, and we'll be continuing to watch that eastward as we head into the next 24 hours. The Rockies, the Wasatch, well over a foot of snow through tonight and into Monday. Some slick travel there. As we head into Monday, some of that energy heads toward the Midwest as light rain and snow. Tuesday is when things really start to get going. The Gulf opens for business. Thunderstorms, heavy rain developing across the southeast and lingering into Wednesday morning. In terms of our severe threat, around the Gulf Coast, New Orleans, eastward over toward the Florida Panhandle, could see tornadoes on Tuesday. Certainly a lot of very heavy rainfall. And this is a very warm storm. If you like a white Christmas in the east, not what you want to see. Wind and rain and an upside down system, Anne-Marie, and that we'll be looking at a rain well up north into Canada, but snow on Christmas Eve into the mountains in North Carolina.
Eric Fisher, thank you. WikiLeaks has struck again, this time releasing what it says is the secret CIA handbook on how to get around security systems at international airports. Our senior national security analyst, Juan Zarate, joins me now from Washington to talk about this. Juan, how dangerous is it that this information has been released?
Well, Anne-Marie, this is problematic because it obviously reveals CIA tradecraft and gives America's enemies a roadmap as to how the CIA thinks about these vulnerabilities. But more importantly, it gives terrorists and those who are trying to evade security at airports a roadmap as well to try to infiltrate and to do harmful things to the traveling public. And so this is a dangerous leak by WikiLeaks, and I would say a very irresponsible leak by that organization. Is the concern, though, bigger than just the release of this one document? Absolutely. I think part of the problem here is that this is new information. It appears to come from perhaps a new source, perhaps a source within the CIA. And if this means that WikiLeaks will begin to release more CIA information, that means that their tradecraft, their secrets, are now going to be on the internet. Senior National Security Analyst Juan Zarate, thank you. Thank you. President Obama says he is reviewing whether to return North Korea to the list of state sponsors of terrorism as the administration plans a vigorous response to the Sony cyber attack. Here's Juliana Goldman.
Well, look. In an interview with CNN, President Obama said North Korea's attack on Sony Pictures is not an act of cyber warfare.
I think it was an act of cyber vandalism that was very costly, very expensive. We take it very seriously. We will respond proportionally, as I said.
A senior administration official tells CBS News that the appropriate response to a cyber attack is not always a counter-cyber effort. In addition to bolstering digital defenses, the official said aides are putting together a package of options that includes diplomatic and economic measures. The U.S. believes the North Koreans are using infrastructure and assets in other countries to stage their cyber attacks. The administration has reached out to a number of nations, including China, for help identifying and disrupting those assets. Officials are also exploring additional economic sanctions. That includes targeting North Korea's elites, similar to sanctions imposed in Russia, where the U.S. has cut off access to cash for those close to President Vladimir Putin. But Republican critics say North Korea did commit an act of war, and the U.S. should respond in kind. Senator Lindsey Graham.
They attacked who we are, and when the president calls this an act of vandalism, that just really bothers me greatly. It is an act of terrorism.
An administration official said some measures will be loud, others more subtle, but cautioned it's not their intention to just run up the escalatory path, because that's not in anybody's interest. Anne-Marie?
Juliana Goldman, thank you very much, Juliana. Well, Florida State quarterback Jameis Winston has been cleared of sexual assault charges by a university panel. Winston was accused in 2012. Prosecutors declined to charge him criminally for lack of evidence. Today's decision means he will also not face any discipline from the school. Last-minute shoppers were out in force today. Did they make it a record weekend for retailers? And Muhammad Ali hospitalized, the latest on his condition when the CBS Evening News continues. All eyes have been on Russia as the country's national currency, the ruble, went into an economic freefall. So here to discuss just what that might mean for the U.S. economy is CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
So first off, what is going on inside Russia?
With oil prices down nearly 50%, the Russian economy, which is so dependent on energy, has really cratered. Add to that Western sanctions, and it looks like the Russian economy could contract by up to 4.7% next year. This got investors very nervous. They started selling out of their positions and pulling up stakes in Russia.
What about the Russian people? Are they seeing inflation at this point?
Well, let me tell you, they've seen this movie before, back in 1998. So what they're doing is very quickly trying to convert their rubles into dollars. They're taking any available rubles and spending them before inflation kicks in, buying cars, buying furniture, and it's been kind of amazing in that respect. But things do look dim in Russia.
And how will this affect us here?
Well, this is really a strange situation because Russia only represents 2.7% of the global economy, but there could be a contagion effect. Could be other emerging markets that do business with Russia, and that could have a spillover. People could get really nervous and just say, I'm selling every emerging market. It's not clear that anything terrible like that has happened right now. I think when you add to it that Putin is an unreliable person and we don't know how he's going to move forward in this next phase, it's a little nerve-wracking. So far, it's contained, but we're keeping an eye on it.
All right, Jill Schlesinger, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, a witness to history.
When that trial was over, O.J. called you first.
He did.
A legendary trial reporter who covered a half-century of notorious cases when the CBS Evening News continues. Associated Press reporter Linda Deutsch has covered some of the most sensational trials of the past 50 years, ranging from Charles Manson to Michael Jackson. She's retiring tomorrow. Here's her exit interview with Daniel Nottingham.
Linda Deutsch has spent nearly half a century covering several trials of the century. Her face and byline now well known. But on her very first day at the Associated Press,
I was the only woman. I was replacing the only woman who was leaving to have a baby. The editor on the desk looked up and said, "Oh no, another new one." And that was my welcome to the AP.
Deutsch was just 26 when she was assigned to cover the Charles Manson murder trial, using the same typewriter she got when she was 10. Dozens of high-profile cases followed, including O.J. Simpson, which led to her greatest scoop.
When that trial was over, O.J. called you first.
He did.
Why?
He would say later that the reason he talked to me was because, as he said, she never said she thought I was innocent, but she never said she thought I was guilty either.
Michael Jackson, did he reach out to you?
He did. Michael Jackson called me and said he wanted to thank me for being fair.
Deutsch has covered at least 50 major trials. In almost all of them, she says, the jury got it right, with one notable exception.
I covered the Rodney King case, and it almost destroyed my belief in the justice system. The verdict was wrong. There is no question the verdict was wrong. And as a result, my city was almost destroyed.
A far different scene from her very first story in journalism, a 19-year-old intern covering the March on Washington.
It was one of the really main watershed events of my life. And after that, you never turn back. Never. What I wound up being was a social historian. It's an incredible privilege. And I hope that reporters today realize what a privilege it is.
Danielle Nottingham, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Well, coming up, reenacting World War I's Christmas truce soccer game. But did it really happen? We close tonight with a story of peace on Earth. For a century now, people have told the tale of a Yuletide ceasefire soccer game in the middle of World War I. The question is it a fairy tale? Mark Phillips takes a look.
Hey, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
The old line about never letting the facts get in the way of a good story could have been invented for this scene. The facts are as slippery as the field. And the story is so good it's still being told, even embellished, 100 years later. It's the story of the World War I Christmas truce of 1914, when groups of German and British soldiers briefly stopped shooting at each other and met and mingled in the no man's land between their lines. On the 100th anniversary, the encounter has been restaged at one of the places along the old front line in Belgium where the truce originally occurred.
There was this like-mindedness. It's Christmas, goodwill. Let's just be friends for today.
And Chris Barker, whose 3 great uncles were killed in the war not far from here, says the truce should be remembered because it shows a different side to a war more known for wholesale slaughter than humanitarian gesture.
I think it just shows the good in people that can be there, whereas days before and afterwards it was barbarous and savage.
It's unclear who stuck their heads up first, the British or the Germans, but before long, troops were flooding out of trenches on both sides of the line and moving through the wire into no man's land. And boys being boys, pretty soon, a ball appeared. The idea is so deeply ingrained in the collective memory, it's been made into a feel-good Christmas ad for a supermarket chain. There's only one thing wrong with this picture. It's probably not true. A British-German soccer game likely never happened. At the Imperial War Museum in London, historians like Alan Wakefield say they've combed through the pictures and the diaries and the letters and found not a single first-hand witness.
If it happened, and there's very few collaborative accounts, there's accounts, second, third-hand accounts of somebody hearing of a game going on somewhere. So I think something happened, but it was probably more of just a big kick around.
Whether or not an actual soccer game took place here is a matter of historic debate. But it almost doesn't matter. The game has become part of wartime mythology. If people think it happened, it happened. And there's one other outstanding question, the score. There's no report on who won. The war, yes, the game, no.
Well, actually, there are a couple of reports which are uncorroborated, but that said it was something like 3-2 to the Germans.
Merry Christmas.
But again, why let the facts get in the way? Mark Phillips, CBS News, Plugsteert, Belgium.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Anne-Marie Green in New York. Later on CBS, 60 Minutes. For all of us here at CBS News, thanks for joining us and good night.